So I have some great news. The great news is our course on communication is now officially open. It is open to the first 15 students who are willing to take the course and provide us some feedback. So these first 15 students are what we call founding students or founding members. And so our founding students, you're going to get the course. It's going to be at a heavily reduced rate. And the reason why we want to do that is not just to create a deal so that people buy, but what we're looking to do is pay you for your time. And so not only is it a deal, but you're getting it at a reduced rate so that you can give us your feedback on the entire course and so that we can improve it for whenever it reopens. And so if you're looking for that information, it'll be in the description of this podcast episode. So go ahead and click that and go through and look at the course, see what's being offered. If you're interested in it, use the code that we're going to put in the episode notes or the description of this episode, and that will give you the course at that reduced rate. But please, if you use that code, we will be reaching out to you just asking for feedback on the course itself. And again, that code will only be good for the first 15 people who use it. So I'm looking forward to seeing you guys inside the course. Love you. Phenomenal followers, friends, and family.
Welcome back to Young Black Married Christian Podcast.
We know you fall into one of those categories. You may even fall into some of those categories. But even if you fall into none of those categories, I promise you that over the next few minutes, we're going to give you 4 to 5 tips, and they're going to fortify the future of your marriage.
Now, we know you're short on time. We know you're short on data, but do us a favor. If you cannot get all the way through the podcast, just go ahead and click the download button that's attached to the podcast and take us with you throughout your day.
Now, there's a lot we got to get into today, but there's a lot to get into, but we're going to do it for you. This is your host, Lashad and Doriana James, from all the way down here in San Antonio, Texas, working hard to make sure your spouse doesn't become one of your exes.
Let's get started.
So
do it again.
No, I love that.
You stole my line.
I did steal your line. Let's just keep it.
And
I like it.
we messed it up.
Who messed it up? I'm cool.
You messed it up.
I'm keeping the whole thing. Look, now hello darkness, your old friend. You want to record the intro again?
Yes.
No. So today we're talking about 4 ways to resolve budget fights. Now, I need you to listen to this podcast. This is a very important podcast because it's not just about your budget. It's actually deeper than that. You ever have a feeling when you lose like $20 or you lose $1 to a vending machine, it becomes more than just money. It's like your life.
Principle.
It's like you stole my life from me. Like I worked for that. Maybe you don't have the same connection to money as I do, but for many of us that work, it's just like, listen, I worked so hard for that $1 and you just took it from me.
Or I just really wanted the animal crackers that were inside the vending machine.
You guys get it. You know how contentious this subject of money can be. I'm going to Google the word contentious after we get done with this podcast to make sure I used it right. But you understand, guys. You guys get it. You're with me. Even if I use the wrong word, you guys are with me. You know how important it is to make sure you get your money right. So today we're going to talk about 4 ways to resolve budget fights.
Yes. Way number one. Avoid the conflict before it starts.
Talk about it, Doriana.
So we need to be very, very transparent and honest when it comes to our finances. You know, we need access to the accounts, statements, financial records, just to hold each other accountable. And these are all just safeguards. These aren't meant to restrict anyone or to bind someone up or to snoop on someone or spy on someone. But honestly, it's always best if you're just upfront and honest with all of your financials that way, all of your accounts. That way, it's those safeguards that we put up for each other. They don't completely eliminate the conflict, but they definitely help define boundaries, and they actually create more freedom when you're given like a field of play and both of you guys know where the field of play is.
Exactly. Like if I notice my wife is getting boba tea every single night and
You'll
I'm
be
like,
why am I not with you?
That is true. But but if I have that transparency into the account and we are sharing that same account, or somehow I have transparency into that account, that we can actually avoid a fight before it actually gets too bad. I can actually bring up that conversation and say, hey, babe, I think our finances are going in a negative direction. So before we run out of money, or before it gets too late, or before we repeat the same thing that's been upsetting me, can we talk about it? And can we, avoid a conflict before it happens? And
instead of just getting a statement in the mail and be like, $500.
I think no, you're right though, because it's the difference between being proactive and reactive, right?
Yep.
If you're reactive with your arguments, that means that you're waiting for something to blow up. You're waiting for a bill to be passed due. You're waiting for the late fee. You're waiting for the angry things to happen. And then you want to reactively have a conversation about it. And that's not going to be a peaceful conversation.
Yeah.
But the proactive conversation, you can actually front load a lot of that tension or that conflict. You can front load it and put it in a safe place by avoiding the conflict before it even starts and having that conversation. So for example, you could say, babe, when I get home tonight, I just wanted to look at our bank account and just have a chat with you, so that you're priming them and you're letting them know, hey, I want to talk about money. And if they're okay with it and they're feeling rested, you can go into that conversation in a safe place, in a controlled environment where both people are not upset. Nothing's happened yet. Nothing's past due. Nothing's blown up yet.
Yeah.
And I can avoid the conflict or front load some of that tension and put it into a safe place and have a proactive conversation instead of a reactive conversation.
Yeah. And that, of course, that goes to so much more than just budget, like money. It's always better to have a proactive conversation and set expectations than it is to have a reactive conversation when you've already been frustrated.
I've heard this somewhere before. This conversation,
so familiar.
I think it's
reactive,
from proactive. I know what it is, Doriana. We have a communications course called Phenomenal Fighting: How to Avoid Common Conflict and Navigate Through Tough Conversations. And it's split into two different sections, the proactive communication and the reactive communication.
Yes.
And if I remember correctly, under the proactive communication, we talk about how to define frustration and how to limit it by setting and managing expectations, which is done with a budget, which is point number 2, but we're not going to get there yet. We talk about questions to ask before getting married, how to use a budget and a shared calendar. We also talk about how to let core values guide hard decisions. We talk about how to leverage books and entertainment. So we actually have a whole training course on this.
Really?
And I'm not going to, hijack the podcast to talk about that, but
You're not going to talk about the phenomenally?
Stop! I'm so done with you. So we'll get back into that. But if you're curious right now,
that we have,
stop. If you're curious, you can go to the description in the in this episode and look at what I'm talking about. There's a training course there. It's going to bless your life. But we need to go on to point number 2. Point number 1 is avoid lots of conflict before it starts. Right. So be proactive instead of reactive. Number 2 is to create a budget together. Create a budget together. This is important to me because you have to have the same family goals, and those family goals are expressed financially on a budget.
Yeah.
So if it's our family goal to support our local church, on our budget, we should have tithes, we should have offerings, we should have missions of some sort. If it's a family goal to invest in education, then somewhere on our budget, we need to have some sort of investments for education, some sort of savings for our children for education, whatever that means to us, it needs to be on our budget.
Yeah.
If exercising is important, then put, some sort of exercise gym membership on a budget. And so it's not just about a budget. I think a lot of people think it's just numbers. It's not just numbers. It's your family values expressed numerically on how your finances are going to flow out of your family into the goals that you have set.
And of course, in the Phenomenally Inner Circle, we do have a little bit more of the breakdown on that. But it's important also to do it together so that you guys both have input on what the family is spending money on, and I think in one of our other episodes, we really talked about how we budget together, which is, Blashad is more of the person who creates that budget, or he used to be. Now I kind of enjoy it so much that we kind of just really do equally, but we set out the numbers, and then there's active participation from both parties, to look at a number and say, maybe we should raise this, or let's change this number. Let's up how much we spend on groceries, or let's up how much we spend on clothing. And you guys need to come together and agree on some of those numbers together. And it's good to understand, hey, our light bill is actually this much amount of money, you know, and our water's gone down. We're spending too much money on water. So it's good to kind of see where the family is flowing, and you guys can have that conversation. And that could be, you know, a date night in itself to understand where your finances are and maybe find more money to spend on the date.
And was trying to say something, or you trying to go out? We could drop this podcast right now and go out to the movies.
Silly.
So I think what you're saying is really important, because people use this analogy that we need to be on the same page, or we're not on the same page. And I think we might make that too figurative or metaphorical, whatever the one is. Which one is it? Figurative or metaphor? I think it's figurative.
Metaphysical.
Yeah. Metaphysical place. It's a metaphysical place. We need to be on the same page. We need to be on the same page, literally. That budget is on one page, and we both need to be on it. Both of our eyes need to be on it. Both of our attention needs to be on it. Both of our interests need to be on it. Both of our goals as a family need to be on that page. And so if we're on the same page financially, we can normally be on the same page figuratively. Yes.
So point number 3. So let's say that you've already found yourself in an argument. Point number 3 would be, when the tension's already high, just turn that argument into a discussion. If you've already found yourselves fighting about money, it's okay. Just take some practical steps to turn that fight into a productive conversation that simply leads you to a better understanding of each other and your money goals. A
lot of fights, and I don't want to jump in here, sorry, Duran, this is a good point. A lot of fights are really opportunities in disguise. You know, when someone's really mad about something, underneath that, it's something that they want and something that they're passionate about that they might not be expressing in the most productive way. And so I've noticed that a lot of our fights together can boil down to something as simple as, I want to spend more time with you. Now, I might, the way I might express that might be not in the best way, or it might get misinterpreted. But if you boil it all the way down, the small little child inside of me is saying, I want to play, you know, I want to hang out with you. It's not something that's, you know, meant to be accusatory or
parents
attacking.
Are kind of, parents kind of understand that. It's because, like, you know, when you're kid starts acting up, it's like,
oh, you're hungry,
you're just cranky, you're tired, go to sleep. And they might be trying to run around, and like everything's like, oh, he's just tired.
Oh, you miss your friend Billy, that's what it is. You know, like they could boil it all the way down to a simple desire that's missing. But I think as adults we complicate that, and so when we argue about money, what we're doing is we're overcomplicating pure desires. Maybe there's a pure desire to save and have some sort of savings set aside. Maybe there's a pure desire to budget, but there's a way that we can, you know, turn our arguments into productive discussions. And it's, you know, it's not by attacking one another, and we'll go into some tips on how to do that. But again, first of all, I just want to say you have to view arguments as an opportunity to really grow together, and as an opportunity to have a productive discussion.
And understanding that every argument, it's not you versus them. You guys are on the same team, fighting to overcome the obstacle and just get back to your relationship.
And ultimately grow closer in the process. And I think one of the things you can think about is that conflict is inevitable, but drama is a choice. That's tweetable. If you got your phone out right now, I hope you're not driving with your phone out. But if you do have your phone out, you could just go ahead and tweet that. Conflict is inevitable, but drama is a choice. You don't have to make this a huge dramatic event. You know, just because we disagree on something financially, or just because we don't agree on something with the budget, we can still disagree, but not make it dramatic.
Yeah, for sure. And one great way to do that, of course, is ask God to be at the center of the discussion. I don't know about you, but it's real hard for me to come sideways at Lashad after I've just pretty much prayed.
Do you know who my Heavenly Father is?
Exactly.
You gonna talk to me like that? In front of my dad?
In front of my friends? But no, it's definitely important in our relationships that we have a prayer time, especially if things get really heated. If we need to take, you know, we've had some tips that we've given as far as how to overcome, like, conflict in those heated situations. Taking that time out if it's really heated, separating each other, take some time to pray and come back together, and then have that conversation and have it be productive, but asking God to be in the center of the conversation.
Yes. Another tip on how to turn arguments into, you know, productive discussions is to be specific about what's really bothering you, and don't assume that your spouse is picking up on what you're laying down. I think that's important, that we don't talk from our emotions, but we can talk about our emotions. And so, for example, instead of saying, Doriana, instead of just lashing out to Doriana, I could say, Doriana, when you know, spend a large amount of money without asking me, it makes me feel disrespected. That's how I can phrase it. I don't have to be like, you're so disrespectful. You know, you're so disrespectful when you do that. Like, you just disrespect me because you're so disrespectful. That's me attacking your character. That's me phrasing a valid point in a incorrect way. Instead of talking from my feelings, I could talk about my feelings.
And then it's not specific. Like, I don't know what the problem is.
Where's the disrespect?
Yeah, like, how did I disrespect you? Instead of being like, hey, you know, we set a budget for $5 and you spent $30. This is really kind of messing up everything that we're working hard for. So of course there's probably an issue that we can pinpoint, and it is our job to be able to effectively communicate what that specific issue is.
I agree.
And another good way to turn these arguments into productive discussion is to deal with the issues as they come up. You know, just don't like a shaken soda. You don't just keep shaking it and not venting it, and you just let it explode one day. You don't let these issues pile up, but deal with the issues as they come. That way they're these small, and they don't even have to be arguments, but they're these small discussions that can resolve themselves, instead of be like, well, on Tuesday you did this, and then on May 2nd you also did this, and I have it in my journal. I've kept in my journal all the wrongs that you've done.
I've kept a record of wrongs.
I've kept a record of all of your wrongs. And then you turn this big argument into something that could have been handled in these small bite-sized pieces.
And again, we already talked about this, but you got to keep the conversation above the belt. And what that means is no low blows, you know, no assuming someone's motive or making accusations. This is not, it's not fair play.
Yeah.
And assuming motives is something like, if Doriana were to spend a large amount of money, like let's say she would have spent $175 at a store at Walmart's, and I'm like, you know, you spent all that money and it wasn't in our budget because you don't care about our budget. So that's me assuming motives. So that's me saying, you know, oh, you're not vigilant, and you know, you just don't pay attention because you never pay attention. That's me accusing. That's me assuming motives. Or, you know, and don't do that. Don't do that. It's not productive.
Yeah,
it's one of those things where it's just wasted words. Honestly, you throw a low blow across the table and you could just send the whole conversation down, because in the time it's going to take them to overlook your offense, and the time it's going to take them to forgive something that you said, and the time it's going to take for both of you to calm down. You know, you've wasted valuable time that you could have been reaching a good
for sure,
you know,
so
middle ground.
Instead of us discussing the $5 that we spent over budget,
now we're talking about why you call me disrespectful
at the same time. Like, you know, why did you say this about me? And then we'll get to the money thing. So it does waste time. And a lot of these are pretty much just good conflict resolution tips in general, and money is just included in some of the things we could have conflict about. Another good tip is avoid terms like always and never, any what we call infinitives, like, oh, you always are over budget, or you never look at the budget, or you never help with the bills, or you always do this, always do that. And pretty much what always and never do and infinitives, they cancel out any time where they did the opposite. It's like, you always overspend means every single time you overspend money, then what are the chances that every single chance you get you spend too much money?
Yeah,
it's disrespectful of the effort that you have put in the opposite direction.
Facts. They teach you in school to never put. They teach you in school that if you see an answer choice where it says always or never, that's probably the incorrect one. To be like, you know, plants always need to grow above ground. It's just like, well, you didn't know that plants can grow underwater. You didn't know that plants can grow, you know, in other places. So using always or never, it's lazy. Honestly, if you get down to the root of it, it's a lazy way to talk to your spouse, and it oversimplifies them down to a problem instead of someone who, you know, occasionally does things incorrectly, or, you know, may do it slightly frequently, but don't say always or never, because then it just discounts any time they've actually put their best foot forward at any time they've actually tried. You know, all of these tips are coming almost directly out of our communications course. It's crazy that, you know, you're listening to this and you're saying to yourself, I really need to download the communications course. It is like deja vu, you know? So yes, that is number 3, that we can turn arguments into discussions. And I should probably put in there, we could turn arguments into productive discussions. Where you're actually growing closer together instead of farther apart. And then the last tip, I think we already mentioned it, is to pray often. You know, we need to keep prayer inside of our relationship. I think prayer is one of the things that really balances me, because I can then view my wife like I'm supposed to. She's not just going to be someone that's common. She's not just going to be someone who's always there that I could treat any kind of way, but she's a daughter of God, that she is in a relationship with God that's going to last much longer than her relationship with me. And so any conversations that we have about money or how to spend money is all going to rotate around those true things. And I can view her as God views her. And again, that helps us, you know, as if we're praying.
And then also viewing money in light of who we are to God, you know, understanding that we're just stewards. We're good stewards of God's money. So the moment that we take pride in the money and we try to raise ourselves up and be like, this is my money, and we kind of forget what our mission is, that's when we put money in the wrong place. Exactly. We put money on the God pedestal and we worship it. So that way, you know, if it's ever violated, then we feel like someone violated our God. But if we put money respectfully where it's supposed to be in our marriage and use it as a tool to help our family move forward, then we're able to kind of understand that this is God's money, you know.
So before we end this episode, you know, we want to go into kind of a quick lightning round on some other tips on how to avoid common budget fights, or if you find yourself in the middle of a budgeting fight, you know, what are some tips you can do? But before we do that, I want to invite you to a special place. It's a place where me and Doriana. Is that a song?
Mm-hmm.
What song is that?
You'll put it in later.
Oh my.
Cue Kenny G. I told you.
I want to invite you to a special place. This special place is a place where you're able to get more content and more episodes like the one you're hearing right now. You're able to get some inside episodes that are not available, some videos that we recorded. This is a place where you can ask us questions, and we're going to come and we're going to answer these questions that you want to ask.
It's a magical place.
It's a magical place. This is a place where you are able to keep this podcast going and support us, and just a way to say thank you for all the information that we're sharing with you. So this place is called the Phenomenal Family Inner Circle. And in the Phenomenal Family Inner Circle, you help us to offset some of the cost of bringing this podcast to you. Again, this podcast costs us a couple $100s to put together when you think of all the equipment and the software and the programming and the research that goes into it. And so, you know, as a way to help us keep this going, as a way to say thank you, you can join the Phenomenal Family Inner Circle. And we have so many perks for you. I can't even list them all. So if you're interested in joining the Phenomenal Family Inner Circle, you're interested in hearing the extra episodes that we have, you're interested in getting a verbal shout out on this podcast, you're interested in just saying thank you and helping us with this, click the link in the description below right now and go ahead and sign up. You know,
join us in this magical place.
She's doing this little hippie dance. It's so weird. I promise we're not going to do hippie dances inside the Phenomenal Family Inner Circle. I promise it's not going to be hippie dances.
He makes a lot of promises, you know, but
I also promise never to call you phenomenally. It's the Phenomenal Family Inner Circle. That's what. No, I promise never to do that.
Be transformed, Lashad.
One episode that's in the Phenomenal Family Inner Circle right now is 11 ways to love your spouse. Is that what we're going to name? We can name it that, right?
Yeah. Sounds good.
Sounds good. 11 ways to love your spouse. This is going to be some really fire date ideas, and not just date ideas, but just ideas that you can do today. Ideas you can execute on today to add a little bit of flair into your relationship, to show your spouse that you really love them. They're going to be like, oh my goodness, yeah, a little spice. Oh, how where'd you get this idea from? Baby, my love tank is full. I'm feeling so loved. Where'd you get these ideas? And you're like, you know what? Don't even worry about that. I got my source. I got a plug on good ideas. I'm telling you, what a plug. We are the plug on good marriage ideas. So that episode is inside. That episode is inside the Phenomenal Family Inner Circle. It's waiting for you right now. Click the link in the description below and we can get those to you. So if you are inside of an argument about money, one thing you want to do is be prepared to tell the whole truth. Don't hide anything back. And this is just an encouragement. You may already know this, but this is just, again, confirmation and affirmation of something you may already know. Be prepared to tell the whole truth. Own up to all your mistakes. A half truth doesn't resolve a whole conflict. Half truths do not resolve the whole conflict. So if you want to resolve the whole conflict, the first step is telling the whole truth. Yes,
kind of close to that one. Just talking honestly. Explain what has happened as honestly as you can. Don't embellish. Don't do anything like that. Just honest, straightforward.
And when someone, you're having these conversations about money, you have to be sure that you're listening attentively. And that's very hard. You know that we actually can think 6 times faster than we speak, which means when someone's talking to us, we're finishing their sentences and thinking about what they're saying at the same time, or we actually shut them off and we start thinking about what they're saying. So
or thinking about our response.
Exactly. So if we're going to listen attentively, we have to be silent, not just physically, but also mentally. Be mentally silent and actually cue into what someone's saying so that you can digest not just what they're saying, but how they're saying it.
Exactly. Another way to get to the root, when you're falling into any destructive behavior or anything that's like a constant issue, sometimes it's something deeper. Like it might have roots that are trying to escape with something else.
Yes. You also need to work together. This is, when you're talking about money, this is not just a one person says something and lays down the law and the next person just, begrudgingly submits to it. No, this is something that you and your spouse are working together on to reach your financial goals. If that's getting out of debt, if that's saving up for something, if it's buying a house, whatever it is, you guys need to work together. And I promise you, on the other side of this obstacle is a closer married couple. If you guys can work together and be proactive and have positive discussions and productive discussions.
Yes. Also be accountable, be accountable with each other, work as a team, be able to talk to each other and encourage each other and motivate each other towards the goal that you guys have both set out.
And you need to continue to communicate. I know this might sound really basic, but how many times in your marriage do you give, your spouse the cold shoulder whenever things get rough, or you shut down communications by either just watching TV or playing video games or just deciding you're not going to speak to him or her? That's not productive. You got to keep the lines of communication flowing. Even if the argument was not as productive as it could have been and you're tempted to just, stonewall and not talk, you got to keep the communication flowing. You have to go back in, apologize, wrestle with the problem one more time. Don't go numb. Don't just veg out on television. Don't just ignore it. Just continue to communicate.
And even if you do, and even when you do get over the issue, even when it's healed, then still continue to communicate, continue to counsel, and continue to, make the decisions together. Don't, after something's healed, don't think we could just go back to the way things were. Continue that communication. And the last tip is stay positive about the future. Working together and working through issues, it can be tough, but we're on each other's team. Encourage each other daily. Stay connected with the people who are lifting you up and keeping your eyes on the healing and keeping your eyes on the brighter future that's just ahead.
Yes. So we talked about 4 ways to resolve budget fights. Number 1, avoid a lot of the conflict before it starts. Number 2, create the budget together. Again, get on the same page. Number 3, if tensions are already high, just turn the argument into a productive discussion. And number 4, make sure you are praying together. And then we had our lightning round of tips that we'd like to give. Doriana, can you read them one more time? What were the tips?
Prepare to tell the whole truth. Talk honestly. Listen attentively. Get to the root. Work together. Be accountable. Continue to communicate and stay positive about that big, bright, beautiful future.
Now, listen, I know we made a promise at the beginning of this podcast. We promised you that over a few minutes, we would give you 4 to 5 tips to fortify the future of your marriage. And I think we did just that. Yes. And so, I'm not going to say goodbye on this podcast. I'm just going to say see you later. See you inside the Phenomenal Family Inner Circle. We're there waiting for you. I promise that music will... I promise we're not playing that music inside the Inner Circle.
Promises, things you know nothing about.
So guys, that's it for this free episode, for this free podcast. Again, we'll see you inside the Phenomenal Family Inner Circle.
Bye.
Bye.